And then not only was it depression, but we were hit by extreme droughts. And probably about the time I was a freshman or sophomore in high school, the hired men, we always had hired help, he and I harvested our entire corn crop on one Saturday because the only place we had any corn was in some of the low places where water had been. Everything died. And because of that, the only feed we had for cattle was the corn, which was cut and bound into shocks. And every morning before I went to school, my dad and I'd go out with a wagon and load a load of that to feed to our cattle. And I can still feel it was cold, and it had ice in it. And the dad would throw it onto the wagon, and I'd get hit with it, and it hurt, you know. It was not fun. So, and then while I was growing up, we were 100% horses, no tractors. And when you're farming with horses, it just probably quadruples your work, because just taking care of the horses is a full-time job, let alone getting the work done on the farm. My dad was tough too, sometimes a little ornery even. He was a very good farmer, made a lot of money, and very smart, remarkable for a man with no education. He was probably the best practical engineer that I've ever known. He could make things, he could build things. He wouldn't tolerate a fence that wasn't absolutely and perfectly straight. Wouldn't tolerate a building that wasn't level. Very meticulous, very fine workman all the way around. The casual observer might have thought that my mother was dominated because my dad was a strong person, but that was absolutely wrong. Where my dad and I visited, we talked, was milking. Every morning, of course, we had to get up, get the cows in and milk. And while we were milking, Dad would talk about what was going on. He'd tell me things that he probably would think later he shouldn't have. But he'd say, "Oh, your mother's mad at me." Sometimes because he liked to play poker, and sometimes he'd play all night. "Oh, she's mad at me." And I'd say, "Well, gosh, Dad, you know, so she's mad at you. So what's the big deal?" "Oh, she won't talk to me. She won't talk to me." and then he'd cry on my shoulder, see. One summer, I worked hard on both at home and then with other farms to try to save some money. I wanted a new bicycle the worst way. And by the end of the summer, I had saved up about $20, which at that time would buy a basic bike. And the way we always bought things like that, we could go through our local hardware store, and he would let us go to the wholesalers in Omaha. And then I think we paid 5% profit to him. So it was a big deal. I had my $20, and we went to Omaha to buy a bike. And I'll never forget it. The place we went was a big warehouse, and it had a loft or upstairs. And that upstairs was probably the size of this entire lot. And literally hundreds of bicycles. For a little farm kid, man, that was impressive. And I was poking around in the low-priced bikes and looking to see the one that I wanted for my $20. And Dad said, "Ed, have you looked at this one over here?" And he took me over, and he was looking at the aluminum brake that my granddad had fixed. Beautiful bicycle. It had a key lock, like to lock on an automobile with a key, horn, light. I said, "That's a beauty, Dad, but I've only got $20. You know that." He said, "That's all right. I won playing poker last night. You can have it if you want it." And that's how I got that aluminum bike. He had won playing poker the night before. Well, I went to a one-room schoolhouse through 7th grade, and my sister and I usually walked to school. It was about 1.5 miles, and one winter day, this granddad that I mentioned called, and at that time there's a lot of snow on the ground, and so rather than to walk on the road, we'd go up the railroad track, which was clear. And he called and he said, Harry, those 2 kids go to school? Yeah, why? It's 20 below zero and you sent them off to school. Well, we didn't know the difference. We got there all right.